Welcome back to the French Rugby Podcast with me, Tim Groves, ex-Scotland back row Johnny Beattie, and former France hooker Benjamin Kaiser, who is normally moaning about the British weather, Benji. But this week, have you been enjoying the snow or what?
I was gonna moan even more. I mean, we had 3 days. We had 3 days of beautiful sunshine that was heavenly good. Once the snow passed, basically, we had a few days that just you can't beat, right? The snow is amazing, but it didn't stick in my garden. No, but man, it's gonna take me a long time to stop moaning about the British weather. Because when you're stuck in your house doing stuff, all day, and then when you want to put a foot outside, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun's already gone. Like, oh, I would like to be with Johnny right now. I'm telling you, but
Mate, it's pissing it down here. It's been raining for 2 weeks. Like, you're not missing out. Don't worry at all. I've been enjoying your running videos though for Doddy Gump.
Yeah.
How have you been finding it?
I hate running.
Same.
Like, I absolutely hate running. But
the irony.
No, no. But I have a feeling that basically it's what allows me to clock in as many miles as I can without having any equipment. Yeah. I've got a bike, but I've got electric bike. And my electric bike, it's impossible not to press that button. It's too tempting, to be like, just accelerate. And then it's the best thing I've ever had. It's a French brand, but it's like co-designed with Eden Park. So I got it through my shops and stuff. It is the best piece of kit I've ever had. Obviously, it's chucking it down in England. It might not be so sort of England weatherproof, but it's absolutely amazing. You can go basically 35, 40 miles. And whenever there's a steep hill, it just takes you a little bit longer and a little bit more effort than if you're running flat, or going on the flat road, but barely. So it's outstanding.
I don't want to insult you here, Benji, but is this an admission that you've been cheating for Doddy? Have you been on the electric bike clocking up the miles?
No. It's, if anything, it's admission of something else, that if I didn't clock as many miles as I would want to, it's because I actually have been running them, and oh my word, running 3 miles for me is the end of my life. Murder. That's 3-4 miles basically is my absolute maximum. Like, let's say 30 minutes, 40 minutes jog, whatever, that's me. And after that, I'm dead meat. So I've been trying to do that. I've been trying to chip in a little bit. Basically, the videos of the Captain Rory Lawson running on North Berwick beaches for like 11 or 12 miles. That's not me, but it's not gonna happen. The guys, whenever they take a picture of the map they've just run, that's not gonna be me, because mine would be a little lake, a little pond in my local park, where you just see little circles, and you see one going guy. He walked there, then he jogged a little bit, then he walked again, then he jogged a little bit. So I'm not publishing that. Just bringing you a number. Right. 2K, 3K. That's about it. It took me 4 weeks to do it, but it's all right.
Benji, we learned last week. It's all about intensity. It's not about long distances. Thibaut told us.
High intensity training, mate.
100%. I have to say, honestly, I really enjoyed last week. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he made a lot of sense, right? He almost made me want to train a little bit more. I mean, that's
wow. That's
the
electric button.
Pressing that. Exactly, you got to adapt. But it makes me realize, if I never scored 60-meter tries, it's got nothing to do with my abilities, because he wasn't there, right?
You didn't have Thibaut.
Exactly. That's
the
only thing that kept me from it.
I was going to ask you, Thibaut's obviously at the top of his game, but we didn't really talk about your experiences of guys doing Thibaut's role. So have you come across some guys that maybe weren't quite as good as Thibaut?
Oh, mate, it's definitely, most absolutely definitely. I'll tell you what my best to worst experience was. So I've been lucky, honestly, to be, Thibaut is actually good mates with a former guy who he's a bit of an arrogant fucker, but every time he goes into a club, they always have to be, right? Every time he goes into a club, he wins. So he's the former conditioner for Italy called Alex Marco, and he was in Stade Français with me. We won it. He went to Biarritz. No, where did he go again? Yeah, he did went to Biarritz before Thibaut, so he didn't win it there. But he went to Toulouse. They won it. He went back to Stade Français in 2015. They won it. And he went to Italy. He is very good, I have to say. He's in Toulon now. He actually replaced Thibaut. And he's always been very, very good. And Stade Français actually based their lead they had on other teams in the mid 2000s, thanks to that, thanks to proper conditioning, where before it used to be, run around the track and nothing to do with power, nothing to do with short distance, but intensity and all that stuff. So I was lucky to do that. Then I went to Leicester. I was drafted in the NFL, really completely different. You like protein shakes and one conditioner for 4 or 5 guys the whole year. Really, really professional stuff. So I was very lucky. But then I went to Castres, and I don't want to slag him off too much because he still is in the game. He's still it's not in Castres, but he's gone to racing now. He followed the Laurent Travers and Laurent Labitte.
Mm-hmm.
It was Gilbert Gascou, can't remember. And he was a former athletics, really good, individually a really good athlete. All we did was run. It was like, you do the 20-20s, like you do 100 meters basically. You do a lap, you do a sprint of a length of a pitch, you rest for 20 seconds, then you go again. And then the first is that you did 10. Then the second one is that you did 2 times 10. And then the third week you did 3 times 10. That was how he would build, your sort of your volume of running. And one day he comes up to me. It's not got to do so much about conditioning, but it's more them overstepping. And he goes, "Mate, I need to see you throw." I was like, "What? Sorry?" He's like, "Yeah, I need to see you throw." Is that, so are you the throwing coach now? And he took it really badly, but I was actually genuine. I was like, the condition is asking me, I need to see you throw. And then, but he said it in the way like, "Mate, I need to see you throw." It's a different way of us, let's please, can we have a conversation about your throwing? I think I might have something to help you, And then I'm like, all right. And then he's like, "Oh, listen, because I saw all those disc throwers and, those javelot, how do you call those javelot? Those
javelin,
the javelin, whatever. And they used to do this. So you need to take 1-2 step and throw like this." And I'm looking at him, all right, session over. And I just left. And then I went, and then I actually called him sort of in the office, and I told to Laurent Travers, like, "Mate, I really like you, Gilbert, but it's the absolute last time you ever chip in about my throwing.
The worst.
This is my stuff. You can tell me that I'm good, that I'm bad. You can give me Laurent Travers, who played hooker and stuff, can give me opinions. But the guy was actually telling me to throw one-handed, take 2 steps, and then throw that thing." I was like, "Grenade! Listen, rugby's moved on. It's 5 points for a try now. It's not 4 points. This is way too far. So it's not really shit conditioners. It's just conditioners thinking they're a bit too big for their shoes,
Above their state, mate. We had the exact same. I can't remember his name. He used to be the Bordeaux conditioner, and he just breaks people, like tears their calves. Everyone tears muscles because he's got no way of gauging how much they're meant to do. He just destroys people. He's at Bayonne just now, and the big fallout.
Ludovic Lousteau.
Oh mate, he's an idiot. Total ass as well. But his last thing was, again, above the station. Like, he used to be a player, great, but you're an S&C coach, so don't tell people how to play rugby. But he spent half of his time trying to tell people how to execute a 3-on-1 and he's like, "Mate, shut up, leave us alone." But I've had a real mixed bag, and you'll know Ludo as well. Like, his reputation is he breaks people, tears muscles, doesn't care, and then spends his entire day screaming at people. Like, just a bloke you do not want to work with. No, you don't want to train for. Just like a horrible bloke. But I've had some good ones. Like, contrary to what came out of last week, I actually really enjoyed. There's a guy called Mark Mio at Cast, who's an athletics coach. And just on like pure athletics and running style, he was really good. He worked with Laurent Arbeau, who's the top 14 record try scorer, who's still, I think he's maybe in Perpignan now.
I think so, yeah.
And those guys were actually quite good fun to work with. But it was more just the contrast in style between arriving in France, everything is still very much long distance, like building up CV, cardiovascular stuff, running 1500s, running laps. Even at Cast, it was, run 400 meters, then 300s, then 200, like long distance stuff, which killed. Like, I'm the same as you, Benji. Anything more than 100 meters and I'm cooked. Versus the stuff that Thibaut was talking about that we're used to in the UK and you would have done with Leicester. I did with Glasgow and Scotland. It was short bursts, high intensity, lactic acid, and it was hard. Whereas in France, it's just long.
But I think you've put an important point. You said you have to enjoy it. So never,
100%.
A bit like we said, the foreign coaches will come to France, and if they don't fit to the culture and the values, if they try to bully guys, it will last for a little bit, but then the French will stand up and tell them to get stuffed.
Rebel,
well,
exactly.
It's the same idea with the conditioners. You need basically, if there's a way of saying things, And like I said to you, you get a bunch of English guys. Don't get me wrong. And Thibaut sort of agreed with that. They will run around. Even now, he said the new generation are a bit less robotic and stuff. And then they will ask after. In France, they will moan. But if you get them to believe, that it's actually good for them and that they can do something extraordinary, not only will they run around that track, but I'm pretty sure they will break a record, or they will die trying. And that's what really Thibaut Giroud got with that whole French team. He got some results and he got them to believe in him. And I think that's absolutely ginormous. It's a credit to the way that he actually handles things. It's a credit to his ability, of course, but there's not only that. And then there's a massive credit to the way that he applies that thing. He was a player. He worked really, really hard. I think he played rugby. You mentioned it really quick, Tim, but he's got quite an extraordinary past. Him and Phil Gardon, who's now the conditioner in La Rochelle, who was my conditioner for a year in Clermont, and they're really close mates. They're like best buds, them two, are the only two French guys that ever made it to the NFL. They never really played like full NFL games, but they're part of that training squad thing, and then did all the friendly games, and so it's still extremely high level they played, I don't know, seasons and seasons of that European but European American football sort of league thing, and they were really good. So this got a crazy pass. They're both badass. They're both, they've been through it. They're not, the chubby guy who's like, run around the track, run faster. Have you ever seen that documentary? I think it's brilliant about what's his name? Usain Bolt, his Jamaican trainer. Oh, right. Mate, is absolutely brilliant. Apparently he's legendary good trainer, his coach. And there's this massive documentary, and all he does is that he does like laps or 100 meters, 200 meters, and you can see that he's with a little clock, barely like click and go, faster, Usain, faster. And then he goes again, and then he clicks it, he goes, faster, Usain, faster, man. Mate, I can do that.
Easy.
So I'm sure there was more to it. But it always cracked me up. Like the fastest man in the world, his coach is just telling him, just go faster, mate.
Probably a pretty good job being Usain Bolt sprint coach, I reckon. Naturally,
yeah, absolutely,
absolutely. And Thibaut, he wasn't afraid to say that they broke a few in the lead up to the World Cup, and leading into this week, Virumi Vakatawa obviously is going to miss the Six Nations with a knee injury that just happened in their game. But what is going on with Gregory Aldrit? Because he was released from the squad, then he played, scored 2 tries for La Rochelle. Apparently he's got to have a scan on his knee, but is this another club v country thing?
It's not a club v country, but it's definitely setting the priority. So from what I gather, he had an arthroscopy, not an arthroscopy, an arthroscan. It's one of those scanners where they need to inject a gel and a liquid inside your ligaments, to see where they move, that ink thing. And obviously you can't play after that for a little bit of time. It might not be 3 weeks. I didn't remember it being 3 weeks. So it must be a little bit more than what we think. Or maybe it's in a special place of his knee or something. But exactly like you said, there's a difference between, I can't play for the French team, but actually I'll play on the Saturday. And why didn't he have that arthroscan, that last Monday, and then actually win a week and be able to come back a week earlier for the French team? That's clearly La Rochelle saying, listen, in the current situation, with everything that's going on, we are going to prioritize the club.
But from the French Federation side, they've probably also said, look, we're playing against Italy first game up, so it's maybe not the biggest loss. We could do with them for the back end of the tournament as well. So as much as it might be a club v country, I think it's a club and country sort of organizing together. Also, these arthro scanners, they take time to they're quite not intrusive, but you need to book in, and it's a serious thing. So I think the Federation and La Rochelle have probably actually worked together to find the best slot. And which has meant that he has it on Monday, so he misses the camp and he can't then move into camp because they're in their bubble, but he can join up for the second block of games. So as opposed to it being a club V country, I think they've actually worked together and they've been pretty smart.
Well, we covered off the world of strength and conditioning, fitness, everything with Thibaut last week. And now we can delve behind the scenes a little bit further with our guest this week. And we can touch on the glamorous, but sometimes also maybe a little bit murky world of transfers and contracts in rugby in France, because our guest is former international rugby player, but now top agent in France, Jamie Noon. How are you?
I'm not so bad, thank you very much. Not too bad in these sort of difficult times, put it that way.
Absolutely. And set the scene for us before we start. Just give us a lowdown. Where are you living? What does a normal day, a normal week look like for you as an agent?
Well, I live in Brive still. So I retired in Brive and then stayed there. But our office is in Toulouse. So I work with a French company based in Toulouse. And there is no typical week, to be honest. Everything changes week to week. We're all over the place. We're always in the car. We're always traveling. I work with, there's 5 other agents in the agency. We do a mixture of different things. We've got loads of stuff going on, so we're all over the place. Obviously, France is massive, so to get around, to see people, to see clubs, we have to be on the road. So we were constantly traveling.
How did you fall into it, mate? Like when you finished, was it something you sort of, somebody just asked the question? Like, I'm assuming you finished in Brive and you took your chômage, as everyone does. And then when you're exploring different avenues during chômage, did it just come up and you thought, I'll give it a crack, or how did it come about?
No, it was a little bit before that, to be honest, because one of your ex-colleagues, Mike Blair, the Blade.
The Blade.
But he joined us. So I think a deal fell through, and he ended up joining Brive. And before he arrived, he'd already signed. But before he arrived, he contacted me to ask me just to help him out with some bits and pieces. And so I helped as much as I could. And then throughout that whole year, it was kind of like a bit of a running joke that he owed me 10% of his salary and that kind of thing. And then as your time sort of winds down, you're kind of obviously looking at avenues and what can you do, what skill set do you have, and how can you best use that moving forward, you know. And I've got 3 children. We were settled in France. We made a massive effort when we first arrived, and so we kind of wanted to stay put and stay on. I felt like my career finished maybe a year too early. I wanted to do one more. But then it was an element of like, well, with regard to my post-career, is it best to try and chase a 1-year deal somewhere, or stick to Brive, stick to a place where they know me and I know them, and where potentially I might have an opportunity to get some work. So the rugby agency thing, I had a look into it. I spoke to a load of agents in the UK. I spoke to a load of agents in France. I had a good look around and sort of contacted and met with a load of these agents. And I felt like with the language and with my experience as a player and obviously having been in the UK and in France, I felt like there was something I could give back. There's a lot of agents that maybe don't necessarily have the rugby playing experience. So I felt that was an area that I could add to the métier, to the work, as it were. And so I ended up meeting a load of people, and someone gave me an opportunity to work as an intern, I suppose, and sort of see how it felt for me and with the family. And we ended up sort of going down that road, and that's the agency that I signed with.
And is 10% about the going rate, Jamie? And did you ever get that off Mike or not?
No. I never even got a frigging coffee off Mike. The Scottish, they're always difficult to squeeze. Every morning, because he was always late. Every morning, I was there with the coffees waiting for him. So,
Great Laidlaw told me once, every pound's a prisoner. Yes, yeah. That's I think those Scots they live by that, don't they?
Actually, Greg, before he came and joined in Clermont, he came to Brive and was looking around Brive, and so I was asked by Brive to just chat to him about the place and have a sit down with him and his family. So,
well, you didn't do a great job, mate, because he didn't come to us.
Maybe I did.
Or maybe you did. Maybe you're kind enough to actually push him towards us. Just a quick question. I mean, I've bumped into a hell of a lot of agents who don't have the best reputation of integrity and all that. And I know that you had that reputation as a player of being a tough, hardworking, reliable, honest, sort of, you know, the sort of one of those pillars of a team that you could sort of base your spirit on, both in England. And I know that you've adapted really well in Brive. And at the end, you just, like you said, you made a massive effort, you and your family, to learn French, to buy into the culture, to buy into the atmosphere of the area and stuff, which not everybody does. And I think we speak about it on this podcast pretty much every week, of the good examples, the bad examples. Definitely one of the good ones. Does that legitimacy or that credibility, does that help you obviously to engage conversations with players, but also to engage conversations with those cheeky presidents that are everywhere in top 14? Or is that just, it gets you through the door, but then you still need to deliver the rest of the stuff?
I think there's an element of both. I think there's, one downside to the agency world is that, it can be a little bit difficult at times to manage. You're trying to manage everybody's relationship. You're trying to manage, obviously trying to keep the player happy, you're trying to keep a club happy, and potentially a couple of other clubs who are interested in the player happy as well. And that's a really difficult task to do without, again, there's lots of history, there's lots of horror stories, and there is lots of stuff that does go on. And I'm not going to delve into any of that, but
that's why you're here. You have to delve into that.
You move a player from a club. At that club, you're the snake. You're the one that's done something, even though maybe they didn't offer the right deal, or they didn't show him the love, or they were looking elsewhere, or all the other aspects that, for that period of time they forget about. So my big thing, and something that I sort of try to continue to strive to do is to just be me. I have like you said, I had an approach to playing the game. I was a hard worker. I had little in the way of skill set, but I made up with it with an element of determination, work rate, and I felt like I wanted to do myself justice, but also, I fought hard for the club, for both my clubs and for the players around me. I wanted to gain the respect from the players around me, and I tried to do the same as an agent. I don't want to be, I think that I will probably, win some battles as a result, but I'll also lose some battles as a result, because there's a lot of other agents who are willing to do a lot worse than I'm willing to do, if that makes any sense. They're going to go a lot further than I'm going to go because of my integrity, and also because of my honesty, I think. And I think when I first started, I spoke to a guy called Simon Cohen, who was at Leicester. I'm not sure if he was still there when you were there.
Yeah, he was director of rugby when I was there.
So he was my first agent when I first started playing the game, 18-year-old. I think he was Doddy's agent. He had Johnny, he had Stevie Borthers. They had a load of like top players, and he was he was a good agent in that sense. He gave me loads of advice. He gave me, and I had a good chat with him when I was talking about the agency stuff. And he said that I probably wouldn't make a great agent because I'm too honest. And I've had that come up in the past, and I think sometimes with regard to creating and maintaining relationships, being honest is actually sometimes the best way. Even if the news is not necessarily great to take from the player's perspective or also from the club's perspective, my approach is to tell them as it is. I think to try and be sort of relatively direct, not necessarily sort of like sugarcoat anything, because it's a waste of my time, but it's also a waste of their time. You as a player, you want to know exactly what's happening, where you're at with things, and there's lots going on, and even more so now with COVID and with salary cuts, with budget cuts and all those things. But from my perspective, I think if you give it to the player straight, then whether it's good or bad news, they can do with it as they please and manage it. If I don't give them it, or wait on it, or sit on it, or hold it, then that makes it even worse. And I think that that is an area where I think being honest, being direct and being straight is actually a good way to do things.
But then that really quickly flies and for instance, if you're we've all been in the same boat. If you're a player and your agent is constantly feeding you crap, obviously every time you sit down with a coffee with your mates, you're like, my agent is bonkers. He's talking absolute garbage. He's stringing me along, and your reputation's shot. It's like you don't last very long if you're not credible and you're not authentic and you can't actually deliver the truth to people. Players appreciate the non-bullshit aspect. That's 100%. But one of the beauties of your position, and when I came over to France, I had a Welsh agent. It was Rhys Parsons at Esportif. One of the beauties is having some sort of neutrality. I felt having a Brit or somebody that was slightly detached meant that it wasn't somebody that was from Toulouse that would be in bed with a president from Toulouse. They were slightly removed, which is where I think probably one of your strengths lie. Because when you come over, you realize that there's like certain agents only work with certain clubs. Some French agents have completely burnt bridges, and the Toulon president won't even speak to them. So I'd imagine that's where probably your biggest strength lies, is that you're honest, you're open, and that you can get across all clubs without offending people and destroying relationships. I wanted to ask you quickly about the changing landscape, not of COVID, but almost pre-COVID with the GIF market. So obviously, up until now, or up until the start of this season, there's been loads of non-GIF players, loads of foreigners. Teams have been absolutely flooded with foreigners, but that has changed. At the end of last season, I had like 50, 60 mates in French rugby, all foreigners, phoning me, being like, mate, have you got anything at Scottish rugby? Do you know, is anything happening in America? But ultimately, there's been hundreds of foreign players that are now on chômage, not employed, or they've had to go back home. Do you think that's a good thing for French rugby? I know it's been hard for people, well, maybe a little bit younger than me, 25, 26, that haven't had the opportunity to come over and play. But long term, do you think it's good for French rugby that there's more focus on French players?
Well, I think, to be honest, I think it's flawed. I think the system's flawed. So the GIF system is, in theory, a good system. If it was, in my opinion, again, this is probably from a professional perspective, not necessarily the greatest sort of approach, but I think, like in the UK, like in Scotland, like in Wales, like every other country, if you can play for that country, you should be rewarded for that. We manage and we work with English players, Fijian players who are GIFs, who benefit from the system in France, but then they'll go and play for their country. And in my opinion, if you are GIF and you go and play for a different country, there's no benefit to the French team. They need to lose their status. The whole idea of the GIF system, and like you say, trying to get more French players playing, but what's actually happening is they're getting more foreigners in earlier. So they're getting into
the academies,
in a centre formation, in all the different clubs. There's 15 Georgians, or there's Fijians, or there's Aussies, Kiwis, Tongans. There's a reflection, of the global. Every club is trying to get the best player, and the best player that's going to be the best for them in every position, et cetera, et cetera. And if they can get them through their system, then that's the best way to keep hold of them. But like I say, I think it's slightly flawed, because these guys can come and they'll benefit from having the GIF status. So in theory, maybe a slightly inflated salary, but then they will go and play for their country as well. Which, in England, if you are EQP, you keep that status until you go and play for a different country. You go and play for Scotland, which might be a slightly easier route. You will then.
That's a camp red path, mate.
You will then lose your status. So that's, for me, that's the right way to do it. Because you can't benefit from the fact that you have to have a certain number of GIF or EQP players, and then also still benefit from the fact that you are, you're proud to be playing for your nation.
I mean, I couldn't agree more on what you said. You remember a couple of seasons ago, the poor Scott Spedding got caught up in that. So he made the effort of actually getting the French nationality. He's got a French passport. He was a French international, but he couldn't get the GIF status because they were like, oh, listen, if we give it to you, then everybody can come. How many? They actually looked down. I think it could have applied to 6 players, including Anthony Claassen and a couple of them, whatever. I think as soon as you got the French passport, just like you said, if you're eligible for a country, you should 150% should have the automatic GIF status, and you should probably lose it if for some whatever reason you decide to play for another country. I think that would only be fair. So speaking of one of them, and again, and I really love him, and I think you take care of him, is Pisili Yato, right?
Yeah.
So Pisili arrived from Fiji, I think from the Academy of Nadroga that they opened with Clermont over there, like Ali Vereti Raka and all that. So as long as they do the 3 years of academy, they are GIF. But he decides to play for Fiji because he's proud to play for them and because he does a great job for them and he wanted to take them to the next step. And I think that's super honorable. So that doesn't change anything. But speaking of him, I think he is honestly the biggest freak of nature I've ever come across. He is tall, powerful, quick, incredibly good at rugby. He's got this mean thing about him that if he wants to hurt somebody, he will run through a door and anyone. He's also got this sort of this parent side. He wants to protect his mates. You know, he wants to get people around him to feel safe and to feel good. And I have to say, he's really one of those guys that I try to help as much, because I think he's got a great heart. He's got he really is a good bloke. And last week,
you see, he was
2 weeks ago, that was exactly I was gonna say.
Yeah.
So I've pushed at him about being more responsible. He can be the guy who would, you start drinking on the Friday, finish on next Wednesday. Okay, so it can be a little bit complicated, but he will never hurt anyone. He's kind, he's genuine, he's generous, and bloody hell, he's one hell of a player. when he wants to, he's just a freak. So 2 questions is, have you ever come across or those conversations that you can have regarding Piscilietto? Has there ever been some sort of extraordinary offer? I mean, I'm sure like World Wrestling Federation could probably want to sign him. That's how big and strong he is. Because I know a few years ago he got touches from Saracens. I think they were pretty keen on getting him and stuff like that. And just are you proud of the way? Because I know that I think you help him a lot to grow as a human also. And so are you proud of where he's gone? Because exactly what you said. He was captain of Clermont 2 weeks ago. And I think you can't even imagine the achievement that it is for a player like him.
Yeah, I mean, I love Pacelli. I've been working with Pacelli for a long, long time. He's grown as a man, as a human, and he's changed lots and lots. And what's quite funny is Frank said that obviously pulled him to one side, said, look, we're looking to make you captain this weekend. And he said, no. And they did it anyway. So, and I think, I think that's a massive reward for the effort and because he has changed, and he has, he did have some, some not so much wild streaks, but occasionally just sort of struggled a little bit in sort of his direction at times, and I think he's come through that. Massive family man now, looking after all the Fijians in anywhere and everywhere. There always seems to be some form of child or even friend from different clubs or different areas of France coming visiting and staying with him. And from on the field, he's an absolute monster. You'll see him absolutely smash someone and then pick them up and rub them down and are you okay? Sorry, bro. And it's like that's the man, and he is a monster of a man. He's got my utmost respect on the field and off the field now. He's come through a lot. He's he's obviously had a serious injury. He's come back from that, and he's worked really hard. He's come back from that, and he's back playing, and he's doing his thing. Like you say, he is capable of doing phenomenal things. But he can make some seriously good gifs as well, because when he's running down the wing and he misses the kick, tries to kick it through, misses the kick, and it becomes a massive thing. He's brilliant to work with. Players like that.
Any crazy offers? Any crazy offers for Piscilietto? Tell me the Oakland Blues, or whatever. Even NFL. Tell me NFL called you for him. That's
no, we haven't had NFL just yet. But we've had. Obviously, we had Montpellier looking for a long time. We've also had a couple of clubs in the UK who were really interested. This was pre changes in salary cap and stuff, and they were quite sort of, they were very interested, and there's some interesting offers. I mean, to be honest, he he's happy, and he's sometimes it's making a decision is not necessarily that easy for Pacelli, and he was happy to stay and extend with Clermont. I think it'd be interesting to see how he goes moving forward. Obviously, the current climate's difficult, so from a financial salary expectation, it's difficult. So probably not the best time to be out of contract, if I'm being honest. Salaries have gone down. There's been a reduction in most clubs' wages.
Can you give us a percentage, mate, like across the board? How much has it dropped?
No, it was, again, in the UK, it's give or take 25%. In France, it depended on the club. So each club was different. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say which clubs did what, but some clubs did minimum 5%. Some clubs have not really changed it too much at all. Some other clubs have gone 20%. But give or take, the French stuff's in around 15, 20%.
And you mentioned that the cuts in the UK have been bigger. Obviously, we know that, and lots of players are heading to Japan nowadays as well. Has there been more interest from your side of things for players wanting to go to France, or is there less recruitment because clubs are trying to retain who they've got in France?
No, I think so far the recruitment's been predominantly extending players at their clubs, obviously guys they want to keep and stuff. Normally in France there is a lot of movement. There does seem to be a lot more movement than elsewhere. This year there seems to be, and again, it's a misconception. It's always been an element of misconception. Guys who are not getting a new gig at their current club in the UK think, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just go to France and sign a bigger deal.
It's finished.
It'll be fine. But that's not never really happened, to be honest. But also, it's unrealistic with the new G stuff, with the change in salary cap. If you want a foreign player in a position, then that foreign player has to add value to your squad, to your team, and will get a salary that reflects that. But a lot of these players thinking that they're not necessarily playing as much as they want, or they don't have the exposure they want. They think that they can just come to France and everything will be fine, and they'll have double their salary and everything will be.
But it's kind of been a long-standing dream that there's loads of guys over the years have come across and done well from the UK, but the landscape has changed, especially because of those GIF rules. So a lot of guys now that haven't found anything. People have been retiring earlier. I've seen like quite a few high-profile people that I thought could still continue to play, but they haven't found anything or anything at decent enough earning level that they want to commit. Like you look at guys like Varndell that came over to Angoulême. He was there for 4 months. He was like, this isn't me, done, home, finished. Because the pay isn't the same and it's not the same salary expectations. I want to ask you about the composition of squads, because I think you hit the nail on the head there. The people that are going to come into France now are going to be your top 5%, your absolute elite operators in your squad, like a world-class 10, like an Andre Pollard, a world-class tight head, somebody like a Carl Heyman that can come in. But in terms of budgets, have budgets dropped massively? Like pre-COVID, had they dropped already, or had that shift in GIF focus meant that sort of young Pro D2 kids that were coming up from France were getting paid over and above salary levels because they were French qualified?
Yeah, I think the climate with regard to the players coming into France, similar to the UK now. There will always be top stars in France, top stars in the UK in certain positions. And you will afford a foreigner in the spine or the spine of your team to a certain extent. Your 3, your 5, your maybe a 9, maybe a 10, maybe a fullback, a goal kicking fullback. That those guys will always be there, but the quality of those players is going to have to go up. They're going to have to be the top end players, like you say. The journeyman, the club man in France, unless they know someone, have got a proper in, or potentially play really well against someone in Europe, it's going to be difficult for them to get in. In terms of the level of players. With COVID last year, we saw a lot of players having to go into top players who were playing regularly in top 14 drop into Pro D2 just because there was no opportunities for them.
Just to keep a job.
Yeah. Budget wise from the clubs, obviously because last year was half and half, we'll say, there was an element of pre-COVID recruitment, and then that had to be adjusted during the COVID, because COVID is still never ending. We don't know when we can bring people into the stadiums again, when we can have rugby as we had before. And not only that, the clubs have been hit by some of their sponsors have had to had real issues and financial issues during this period of time as well, and so they're going to either have to decide whether that amount of money is going to be invested in their local club still, or whether or not they're going to have to remove some of that to try and save their business, or to maybe to invest in people's jobs and stuff like that. So we don't know where we're going. Fundamentally, we do know that there's going to be a reduction in budgets, and every club has a different budget. Everyone has a different vision. Like you say, Benji, some clubs can manage with their local sponsors, private sponsors. Some clubs, like a Brive, they have a mixture of national and local guys that they rely on heavily. You know, and everyone is in a sort of period of, I suppose, reflection. We don't really know where we're going from a club perspective. They don't know where they're going. Some clubs have said that they think that in a year's time they'll come back to, or give or take, back to where they are. The issue is, like every year with regard to recruitment, there'll be some crazy. Everyone will say, yeah, no, we're going to reduce by this. We're going to reduce our salary or our budget by this, that, and the other. And then some crazy president will go all out on someone, and as a result, explode the market. You know, and it's that's just the way it is every year. But I think for at least a year, 2 years, salaries are going to be back to, you know, not so much back to normal, but I think that, you know, there's going to be a lot less money in the market, I think.
It's certainly quite an uncertain time, though. And you touched a little bit about the sort of the pastoral role that you have as an agent. I think people just think contracts, that's what you do. But especially in France, you're looking after people a lot of time, people that don't know the language, you're helping them settle in. It must have been quite tumultuous. I'd imagine there would have been quite a lot of upset people. People ended up unemployed. Is it quite tough to manage people and look after your clients during the past year?
What's been the hardest is normally in a lot of circumstances, it's not so much as it's not easy to guide people or to console people or to help them. But because we've had experience in it and we know what we're doing and we know the, you know, the ins and outs and the processes, it's easy. But COVID, no one has a clue. No one has a clue. If you look at the governments, and we can't be held accountable because the government said we can have 1,000 in the stadiums. Actually, no, we're not. We're gonna reduce it to 0. You know, we can't preempt those things. We can't preempt how to manage those aspects, or even, you know, with regard to the negotiations within the clubs for salary decrease and stuff like that. Some clubs got individual players in and spoke to them and discussed reduction in salary based on their individual contracts. Some clubs said, look, no, everybody's in this. We've all got to agree to it. We're going to do it all together. And so it was all very different, and we had to take a different approach with a lot of different people and clubs. But like you say, that, you know, the fundamental thing is a lot of guys have lost their jobs and have got nothing, and they're still sort of looking for, you know, joker spots or opportunities to come up, which is tough. But that's the world, and it's not just rugby, and it's not just France. It is a global problem at the moment, and, you know, we're trying to figure out, you know, different ways to try and help everyone.
And Jamie, I think you're registered with the FFR and the RFU as well, so you've got experience of dealing with both of them. I imagine there's some differences there, but one of the main differences between, or the perception anyway, the differences between France and the UK is the owners. So I know Benji and Johnny will probably weigh in. They've got tons of stories about owners, but you don't have to name names, but that must be a big difference, eh?
No, it is a bit different. And again, France is different. And England's, you know, they're very much different approaches. You know, I think the UK, a lot of the time, most clubs will have a dedicated person in the recruitment aspect. So you predominantly deal with them. So you won't necessarily, sometimes you'll deal with coaches or you'll deal with higher level. Whereas in France, a lot of the time, the presidents quite like to be involved. Some presidents don't. They come into the negotiation towards the end when it comes to, you know, the money aspect. Some will literally just be there for the signature. Obviously, Clermont, they have a recruitment manager. They also have someone that you negotiate with for the contract and for the commission, for the agent's commission. And more often than not, the president will be there for a signature, maybe a photo, but he doesn't necessarily get involved, whereas other clubs are heavily involved, and, you know, it's quite important to get along with them, and you have to manage their characters, and there is some serious characters, you know, in the game, you know, and when you add money and influence and to the bubbling cauldron, sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's tough.
So obviously you have to be kind to others and you have to weigh your words, and I 100% agree with that. I don't. And I've got one extraordinary, not extraordinary, but one fun sort of encounter with Mourad Boudjelal. So I was in Leicester, then I signed back in Stade Francais. Things were not going well. The club was struggling financially. I wasn't playing well, and so I had two offers: to go to Clermont, to go to Toulon. And I go to Toulon, and obviously Mourad Boudjelal is like, no, I'm in what is he doing? Like a health, I'm a thalassothérapie. I don't know how you say that.
Yeah.
I'm doing like a health therapy, whatever, spa, where for the week. So you have to meet me in Cannes. Okay, Cannes is only an hour and a half away from Toulon. So I get myself there, and he's at the Ritz-Carlton, obviously, you know, the biggest, fanciest hotel, whatever. And I see this guy sitting. He wasn't sitting on the chair. He was laying inside his chair like this, like barely looking at me. Obviously did not stand up when I arrived. Just looked at his wife, got his credit card out and went shopping. That's all he said to her. He didn't say, sorry, darling, you know, we need to speak, we need to chat. He just said shopping. She stood up, she left, whatever. And I'm thinking, all right, so this guy wants to sign me. And then the first question he's asking me is like, why do you want to come to Toulon? I was like, well, it's not exactly the way things going on.
Did you point at the credit card, Benji? Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to go shopping too. I want to go shopping. And honestly, so he pulled out a show, and he was a bit weird, and I got stuck into him a little bit later for that, because he came out with some shit in the press. But it ended up actually pushing me to exactly what he said. The reason why I fell in love so much with Clermont is just their professionalism, the serious they've got about the institution. They can make mistakes like everybody else, obviously, but at least they're not backstabbers. They're pretty honest people who will, you know, deal with things thoroughly, and that's what I enjoyed the most. So that's my little experience of Mourad Boudjelal, but I'm sure you had others. You don't have to name any names, but I'm sure you've had some crazy stuff happen to you.
I've had some interesting stuff. I actually, when I came to France, my first meeting was interesting. I found that quite interesting. So back in the day, I just played a game for Newcastle. I think it might have been on maybe a Saturday evening, and then on the Sunday I got the train down to London, then down across to Paris, and I was due to meet with the owner of Brive at the time, a guy called Daniel de Richebourg, who was massive in recycled metal and inherited. He bought a company and inherited as a result the club. He was affiliated to Brive and ended up with a club and didn't know anything about it. So I went to meet him and the coaches who were keen on getting me to Brive. And I arrived, and in the game I'd cut myself, so I had a bit of a cut, bit of a black eye, a couple of stitches, and I arrived late at night in Gare du Nord, and I had a hotel booked in Gare du Nord with a view that I was going to meet the following lunchtime. And I was lost. I didn't really know where I was. And they said, look, just get a taxi to the hotel and you'll be fine. The taxi driver was just like, no, mate, it's just around the corner. Just walk around. So I was walking around and I didn't know where I was going. It looked a bit dodgy, this area. And there was like lots of prostitutes everywhere. It was a bit weird. And then I ended up going into a couple of hotels and they had like security on the doors. And the security wouldn't let me in the hotels because I obviously looked a little bit beaten up and stuff. And eventually I found the hotel, got in the hotel, and the next day we had this massive meal. And I said to my wife before, I was like, I don't know if I could live in France. I don't really like France. They didn't let me in the hotels, and the area was really rough. It was horrible. It wasn't necessarily, obviously it's not quite Newcastle. We ended up having this meeting, and we had a meeting, and the whole focus was about my weight. And this was again very French. It's all about stats, and they were like, "Well, wait there. How much do you weigh?" And this was. Do you remember Laurent Sen, Benji? Yeah. So he was very.
He said prop for Brive.
Yeah, so he was old school, and he was, you know, he was a bit about obviously players who were hard and who were, you know, aggressive and who were in your face and stuff. And I felt like I had an element of that on the field, but obviously off the field, I wasn't very tall. I wasn't massive wasn't very dense or anything like that. I didn't weigh a massive amount. And so initially, he asked me that as like one of the first questions. Hi, you know, sit down. So how much do you weigh? And I was like, oh, this is a bit strange. And he asked me about 5 times in the it was like an interview sort of get to know the club. He asked me 5 times and I was like, what the hell? What's that matter? And then towards the end, he asked me, and I was a bit like, well, to be honest, I said, it's not really the size or the weight of the dog in the fight. It's the fight of the dog, or the weight of the dog in the fight, as it were. And he was like, I love it. I love it. I love it. And then that was it. That was the meeting sort of over. I'd done enough to convince him. He was sort of all over it. And as a result, I ended up getting an offer sent through and stuff. And my wife went down to visit Brive, and that was it, done. But it just goes to show how sort of sometimes fixated they are on a certain opinion or a certain thing. And that can be the difference between signing them or not.
Max Gozzini told me once that he didn't sign Morgan Parra, who was the hottest number 9 at the time, because he asked him, what kind of book do you read at the moment? And Morgan's like, what book? Well, I read L'Equipe this morning. L'Equipe is like the sports newspaper that you read in the morning, because he didn't read a book. And Max is like, I'm not going to sign a player who doesn't read books. What are you talking about? If you come to Paris, you know, it's because you like theater and you like museums. And he didn't even talk to me about the Louvre. Yeah, that's not the right questions you should ask. So you can have some crazy conversations.
Man, I had the exact same, Jamie, with Montpellier when I signed. It's like we had the whole contract, and then they were like, oh no, there's been a hold up. They need to ask you some questions. And so I think it was either Fabien Galtier or it was Denis Navizet, who was the chief exec or the right hand to president at the time. They phoned them, like, how much do you weigh? That was all they wanted to know.
Yeah.
Like, because we need to know that you're like bigger. So I think at the time I was like 106. I was like 112.
Yeah.
Get that paperwork sent through. And that was it. It came through the next day, but there's no way. That was it. That was all they wanted to know was how tall are you and how much do you weigh?
Yeah.
And obviously all of the owners are colourful, Jamie. We know that. But Benji mentioned Murad. You can talk about him. He doesn't own Toulon anymore. He's fine. We can talk about him. So any dealings with Murad?
Yeah, I've done a bit with Murad. I obviously, well, friends with Johnny as well. So I used to go down there and visit quite a lot, and I'd bump into Murad quite a lot. You know, I think there's lots of stories about him and how he manages the clubs and dealt with the clubs. But whenever I spoke to him or saw him, he knew I was Wilco's mate. So he was just like obsessed with Johnny, obsessed with him, and would just talk about Johnny. And to the point where I think we were down there signing a player. We end up actually, because of these the indemnity de formation. So if you're in an espoir and you're leaving the club, you have to pay like a compensation. And we ended up moving a player who was playing quite a lot to Aurillac at the time. I think Benji might have played with him, Jimmy Yobo. Yeah. So we ended up moving him. He was he was like, what did he, 20 years old, 21 years old, and he got 60 odd caps or 60 odd games in the Pro D2. Real sort of, he played 20s, he played French 20s and stuff. He was a real sort of high profile young player, but because he had these high indemnities, clubs wanted him, but they just didn't want to pay that on top of a would-be salary as well. So he was quite sort of stuck, and he had a 3-year deal that he would have had to take if he didn't go and find anywhere else. So I think it was literally like the last day of because we have a transfer window, and it was like the last day of the transfer window, we managed to get a meeting with Toulon. And so we're down with Morad, and we were chatting about these indemnities and stuff. And he was like, "Oh, wait there." So he just phoned up the Aurillac president, and he was saying, "Oh, look, yeah, no, these indemnities there were a little bit high. You know, maybe we can come to some sort of agreement." And it was brilliant because we couldn't do it on his behalf in a sense, because it was he was offering and promising loads of different things. I tell you what we'll do is we'll come over and we'll have a pre-season at yours, pre-season game, and you guys can keep all the money associated and stuff like that. And he was like, but I tell you what though, all I'd ask for is the travel. You cover the travel costs and stuff like that. And so they were having this like negotiation, and it was quite. And he was quite bullish and he was bullying him a little bit, you know, because he was like, "This is Toulon. Yeah, no, I'll bring the stars. Yeah, don't worry. I'll sort out the stars, or some of the stars will play. Not all of them, but some of them will play and stuff." And Wilco was kicking at the time, and I think he just retired. He kind of finished his career, done the double, and he was still kicking. And we were talking about that, and more I was like, oh no, he's nuts. He's absolutely nuts, still kicking and loves it. And he was loving it more. And ended up organising and sorting out Jimmy Obo to come to the club. So he signed for 3 years, 3 seasons at Toulon. And then eventually he ended up not fulfilling the deal with the pre-season game. So he ended up sort of getting for nothing, which is very classic. I don't know how or what happened with the pre-season, but it didn't go ahead.
That all sounded quite above board until them not turning up. I wanted to ask you how much underhand stuff have you seen? Because obviously Saracens is the obvious one in England. It's been done for their salary cap, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes in France, whether it's like rumours at Montpellier that they're paying people to farms back home in South Africa, or they're paying Goosen, who's sitting in Bloemfontein, or at Toulon, it was rumoured that they would declare a certain salary and then pay half of it offshore to Argentina. Like, how much do you see that is just ludicrous? Now that Murad's gone, you could probably lift it a little bit. I don't know if you want to, but there is quite a lot of hiding cash, isn't there?
Well, it's not so much. Well, yeah, there's manipulating
The system.
Offers. And I think, to be honest, in the UK, they're just as good or as bad at doing it. There's obviously the whole Saracens thing was a big thing, but there's lots of other clubs who have, there's ways of dressing up the contract so that it's so it doesn't look the same as it actually is, if that makes any sense. Whether that's image rights, whether that's helping with it can be helping with wives with jobs and stuff like that, or sometimes I'd seen some have been employed by clubs as so cleaners or something like that, and there's lots of different things that are in there, and I think fundamentally it's partly the clubs, but a lot of the time it's obviously the players want more and more from the clubs and from contracts, and sometimes the clubs they can't do it. They have to try and fit. It's a jigsaw puzzle, and I don't know how they do it. And I was talking to a recruiter this week, and I was saying that it's the idea of that would blow my mind. Trying to fit all these into, you've obviously got credits in the UK, you've got your academy-based guys who come through, therefore don't go into salary cap and stuff. Fitting all this into a puzzle and the GIF aspect to it as well is really tough, But like I say, fundamentally, players want more and more from their contracts. They want more and more from the game. We're here to try and get the best, and the guys are in it for. Well, if you're lucky, you manage to do like Benji, do 16 years. That's absolutely brilliant. But 16 years in a career is actually nothing, And there's so many risks that players go through. There's lots come up recently, friends of mine who are struggling with bits and pieces. So we have to protect the players as much as we can, and also we have to make sure that whilst they are on the front line, putting their their lives at risk, fundamentally, they are rewarded, so that at the end of their career, if they've had a really good career and they've given everything, they hopefully have something to fall back on. We're never going to be in the realms of football where that's it, you don't have to work again. But if you can cushion the blow a little bit so that they don't have to necessarily get a job that means that they'll, that they get paid thousands and thousands, but means that they're comfortable and they're happy, and obviously they look after their families, and that's what we're looking for.
And you mentioned football and a transfer window as well. No, it's not the same in rugby, but we're getting there. And this time of year, we do hear a lot of transfer rumours. We love a rumour. As an agent, do you drop stuff into conversations? Bump up the price?
Sometimes. Part of the tactics, isn't it? Sometimes. There's also sometimes you leak something to the press, or it is a tactic, and it's it's sometimes a little bit. In fact, no. If you are speaking to certain clubs, like I say, I try and speak to the clubs I'm dealing with and tell them that I'm dealing with the other clubs as well, or that they have other interests, etc. Because one, it can help with the negotiations. if you come in and you don't have any other options, then from a negotiation perspective, it's difficult. So if there is options, also from their perspective, it's good that they know, well, we're competing with that club, this club, that club. I know that in the UK, for some reason, whenever any agent speaks to any club about a player, yeah, Bristol are interested.
Yeah.
And in France, it's, yeah, Montpellier are interested.
Steve Lansdown's got a lot of cash, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and a lot of the time in this business, you get found out because they'll ring Lammy, mate, why are you interested in this lad? He doesn't even play. Why are you interested? Well, we're not. Well, his agent's bullshit, you know, and so you can get found out, and it is a little family. You know, the rugby world isn't very big at all, and you can get found out very quickly. So in terms of reputation and in terms of, you know, your credentials from an agency perspective, you have to be very careful what you are saying, what you are doing, and manage that, you know. And again, I think sometimes the best way is to be honest, you know. And if that information, if the club have that information, but it also leaks somewhere else, then that doesn't matter because they already know. But it may help with whether it's visibility or whether it's, you know, fundamentally you want everyone to know that your player is out of contract and is looking at options, because then, you know, chances are you'll have more options or more opportunities.
To tell you how easy it is to link information to the French press, especially Midi Olympique. When I was a lot younger, we used to do the sevens tournament in Madrid, which was the biggest piss up I've ever been to. It was absolutely outstanding. 3-4 days of just playing. You imagine me playing sevens. I went for after the game, not for the game, and we were just, you know, those happy times with your mates and stuff. So at the end, I didn't play anymore. I was just a manager, but I was there just to take care of it. And one day we actually had to play to pretend to be the German sevens team because they were missing some players. So some of my mates actually played for Germany, and we had a laugh. And I think we played Croatia or something. So we really, obviously non-official games, whatever, but you still needed to put some sort of paperwork in it. And so, and one of our mates was an agent. And after that game, he actually sent a text to Midi Olympique to say that this young German winger who's been tearing up in Madrid, which is one of my best mates, who played for the under 21s of Suresnes, which is a club near Paris, that is attracting quite a lot of interest by Stade Français, Montpellier, whatever he said. He just put a list. And at the bottom of the paper, the week after, the cri et chuchotement, you know, the little whispers of rumors that there was hot new prospect. This German winger who's tearing up in Madrid was there, and we were laughing about it. So any rumor they will pick up and they will whisper again.
What I find quite funny is obviously being sort of on the inside to a certain extent, and when you read stuff about your own players, you know, there's obviously loads of rumors and you're not sure if, well, there might be an element of truth in that and this, that, and the other. But when you hear or read your players' rumors are sort of quite funny. Like, where have they got this from? We haven't met them. I thought what we're doing, you know. And so I find that quite funny. Just being on the other side of the fence is a little bit interesting as well.
So Nooni, who are your high-profile boys that are now you've got this platform? You can get out to all the presidents. Everyone's listening, obviously.
We'll start remits left, right, and centre, won't we? Yeah.
Exactly. Let's get out of there. Who are your big dogs that are off contract, both French and foreign, that are going to be looking for either to extend their deals or to move on end of the year and find the next big massive deal?
Well, we've got a couple of players who are still sort of looking. So we did Johnny Sexton's move into Paris back in the day. So he's off contract, doesn't know what he's going to do, and so
is he coming back?
Well, there's rumours that he's looking, you know. So he doesn't know what he's going to do yet. He wants to continue playing, which is good. He thinks, you know, body-wise, physically, that he wants to, and he's more importantly, he's motivated to continue. And I think that's the big one for someone like Johnny.
I know Clermont are looking for a 10, mate.
I do too.
Oh my word!
Here we
would be
in that web.
I tell you what. No, but jokes aside, I don't even know if there's any truth to it. I don't care. Please don't say anything, Jamie, to jeopardize whatever you said. But the idea of getting the experience of Johnny Wilkinson, where he doesn't need to play every single week in a top club like Clermont, bloody hell, that would be amazing.
No, I think the key, someone like Johnny is you bring him in to help the younger generation. His experience, and you marriage that with someone coming through. And I think that would be, even someone like, say, a Mathieu Jalibert at Bordeaux.
Yeah, 100%.
Bring him in. He would play most of the games, Mathieu, but having that sort of experience of managing a game, because he's got the natural flair and the speed and the ability to create things from nothing. You add sort of from the background, this element of managing a game a bit better and understanding the pressures associated to, especially the bigger games. I think that would be a great sort of great combination, But the issue is with someone like Johnny and with not so much Johnny, but with a lot of foreign internationals, is that the French clubs, they're going to be paying them big bucks to come over here. They don't want them to go back and play for their countries, because you're missing you're missing 12 games, maybe more a season, and so therefore they prefer to get someone who's going to be, maybe who's retired, or who's definitely going to be there or thereabouts every single year, especially when they're losing someone like a Jalibert or a French international somewhere.
And before this rumor goes wild and we get wrongly credited, we are talking about Johnny Sexton and not your mate Johnny Wilkinson coming out of retirement, aren't we, Jamie?
Yeah. No, it was just these are all rumors. They're all rumors at the moment, but these are all just things that these are in the pipeline. Clubs are considering all these different aspects, and that's something that's it makes it interesting in this job sometimes, is that you don't really know where this fit will come. Sometimes you'll get a great offer from a club, but the player's just like, nah, I can't live there. There's no way I can live there. It's too cold, or it's not, I want to be on a beach, or want to be, and sometimes that's quite hard, because you've got to manage obviously financial expectations associated, but also then they've got their personal opinions or choices to make as well. And so you think you've done a great job and you've got him a great deal, you've negotiated hard, and you've got loads of money in this club that actually is a great fit for them. And sometimes that's where I have to stand back a little bit, because I know that these players got, elements of weaknesses in the game and this, that, and the other, but actually this would be a really good fit for them because of the style of play, for the style of the manager as well. That's going to be something that you have to calculate, because certain players will work well under certain coaches, and maybe not as well under different coaches. So you have to manage that into a would-be decision, but fundamentally, we're not in that decision. It's the families and it's the players and it's good, but actually no, I don't want to go there. I want to go there. And that's sometimes that's quite hard to manage.
And not just when players are moving clubs, because we've spoken quite a lot about that. But Benji mentioned the work you've done with Patheliato. We're all about dispelling myths on here, aren't we, Benji? And the kind of the work that agents do just during the year, like that kind of. You must do a lot of work with players that, as from the outside, people just say agents wheeling and dealing and whatever, but actually you've got a really important role to play.
I think so. I mean, as obviously I'm slightly biased as an agent, but we do a lot of firefighting. We do a lot of firefighting throughout the season. We do help with relationships with the clubs as well. Player. Sometimes, especially like someone like Patheli, he's very shy and timid, and so sometimes they also, Fijian or Islanders sometimes have this. I think they call it like a white man syndrome, where that they have this over respect for people in power, and sometimes they don't want to go and not so much confront them, but they don't want to speak to them, or they're very shy and avoid that. So our role sometimes is to get that information, or to get the information across, or because we speak to our players every week, we go through their games, we have a lot of things that help us. We have this like a stat system, we have the videos, we can't be at every game, obviously, especially now, but we can't be at every game, we can't watch every game every week, so in the week we'll go through players' videos, and we'll sort of do a debrief. We're not necessarily coaches, but that's an area where I think that I like to think that I can help players. So if they've got questions as to why do you think I'm not involved, or we'll speak to the club to try and get some information from their side of things, but also from what I see on the field. I can say, well, you need to be doing more of this, you need to be doing more of that, you try and do this, try and do that. Some clubs are very statistic orientated, and look, you can manipulate your stats a little bit by just working a little bit harder to get there early, and then you're the ball carrier instead of just sort of plonking onto the ruck. So they're sort of ongoing things that we do sort of week to week. And like I say, as and when things blow up, we've got people in place to manage that. Obviously, there's solicitors and stuff if there's some serious stuff happening. But also we're there to try and look after the best interest of the player. And sometimes the clubs can put them under a little bit of pressure to do certain things. And sometimes we have to try and be there to sort of, again, we're an element of a sounding board. I don't know how many times we've had players ring up and just complain, but we're there for that. And sometimes it is a bit like, I know what's coming, but actually that's what we're there for. And if that means that in their whole, in their general day-to-day life, they are better, they're a better person, they're more positive, or then that's our job done. We have helped contribute to that person, and there's lots of obviously mental health stuff going around with, associated to COVID, but also pre-COVID, about lads being, men, and they've got to be hard, and you hide your feelings and stuff. And if we, in our role as agents, as mediators, we're there to just at least take some of that sort of pressure or problems off their shoulders, then that's our job done. That's something that we are more than comfortable doing. We do with a lot of players, and we you get to know certain players who are more prone to do that, but then also you get to feel when players have issues. Sometimes they're very good at hiding them. Sometimes obviously their Instagrams and this, that, and the other, they have things like, ooh, happy days, but deep down, or even sometimes because we're working with players we've worked with for a long time, we speak to the wives. The wives will get in touch with us, and the wives will say, well, look, he's this, that, and the other, or I haven't seen him for 2 days, or whatever, So they're different tactics or different elements of a role that we play within a career. There's only certain aspects that we can influence. We can't sort of make someone better. I can't play instead of someone else, thankfully for them, probably. So in terms of our, what we can manipulate and what we can, we can't do too much, but we are there in the background. We're a constant in the background that's helping to get the best from these players, to keep prodding them, to keep pushing them, to be motivated, to work a little bit harder, to be a little bit more professional, or even specifics within the game, and then also with their relationship with the club, with their relationship. So we're speaking to the clubs and the individuals within the clubs regularly, so we can get tidbits from them about his attitude, because they'll tell you one thing, and then you obviously have to verify it with the club and just say, is that true? No, it's not. He's lazy as fuck. He's not coming in. He's not working hard. So. And as a player, you do have sort of slightly inflated egos or I suppose opinion on your performances and stuff. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But that's our role, and that's something that maybe is overlooked. We do have to negotiate with the clubs. We do have to negotiate in some difficult circumstances as well. Players who have been out for years, and the club are trying to not so much shaft them, but the club think, well, actually we can just offer them a little bit less, or we'll just say this. Obviously there's some difficult conversations, and there's some, what's quite hard for me at times is I do still have that empathy with the players, and when they're, I know the family, I know the kids and stuff, and and the club's saying to me, yeah, we're probably not going to keep him and stuff, he's getting on a little bit, and you think, well, we're a bit late in the day. I'm not sure we're going to get anything. And that's a real difficult conversation to have. But, hopefully we've prepared them along the way, that it's not a shock, that it's not necessarily, come out of the blue, and that we've hopefully got a couple of irons in different fires.
Clearly a far more complicated business than a lot of people on the outside realize, and great to get your insight on everything that goes on behind the scenes. And thanks ever so much for coming on. Good luck with getting Johnny Sexton to Clermont over the line, Jamie.
Let me know if I can help.
Yeah. Cheers. Take care, guys. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Noonie.
Cheers, Jamie.
Cheers,
Thanks
Jamie.
a lot.
Bye-bye.
Great to have Jamie on and hear a bit more of the holistic role that the agents play. And they do a good job, don't they, covering certain things up?
It's almost all encompassing now. I think the traditional view used to be sort of sly job, taking commissions of contracts, not really adding much. But actually, especially in France in a second language, they do loads. Like from finding houses, getting your electricity plugged in, like banal things that you just would not know how to do, to the managing relationships, going back and forth between presidents, being that buffer, because people have been shafted the world over in rugby financially, but mate, they do so much. I remember one of my teammates at Cast was saved entirely by his agent. He, I think at 5 a.m, got in the car after a big night out, drove through the McDonald's drive-through in Cast, took off the side of the McDonald's building, knocked the whole thing down, and the agent was the only guy that could save the thing and kept him in a job, and all got covered up purely because of the agent. So, mate, there's a lot that we see on the surface of being there for deals and signings, but they do a lot behind closed doors as well, whether it's helping families, ironing out big issues. Mate, they do a huge job. They're a massive help.
You can't say enough of how much rugby players are special animals. So if you add that
Idiots.
with the special the special way of thinking and dealing with emotions in France, you multiply that by the special presidents that we had, because you didn't want to go deep into that. But
No.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Lorenzetti, Altrad, Boudjelal, you could write a book around it. There'll be some crazy dealings. I know Boudjelal has paid every single cent that he owes Johnny Wilkinson, but I think he's the only guy. He's got about 12 lawsuits behind him for all the guys that he's employed so far. So there's loads of different ways of not doing things properly that he could have said. So that makes quite explosive cocktails. Obviously, like you said, the agents are the buffers, and they've got a huge amount of work to do.
And did you guys change agents much during your career? Were you always happy with your agents, or any?
No, for me, only the ones. I don't know about you, Johnny, but I had a really like a close mate who was my first agent, and then I signed in Leicester sort of without him because Augustin Pichot helped me, and we pretty much did it together. And then he's just stayed with me, helped me, got me back signing in Stad. And then in Stad, I was in the shits, and he came back to me. He's like, listen, because I asked to leave the club, and the club said, no, the club said they want you to stay, and blah, blah, blah. And you're from the academy, and you're the only one, you're the heart and soul of this club. Huh? And then another big agent calls me, and he's like, listen, I've heard you're in trouble, whatever. I can get you out. I do a FaceTime or like a conference call with my agent, this new agent, and me. And I'm like, listen, I will go with you if you get me out, but that's the only thing. And he said, not only will I get you out, but I'll get you a check to go out. And I was like, that's not possible. And he had that 2 days after. He had that 2 days after. And so I said to my sort of teenage years, mate, I was like, listen, yeah, I got to go with the big dog just because. And then he sorted me out, and he helped me a lot with different things. And he's followed me through my career, and even post-career still helped me with a few things. And he always told me that the trick in the book is to say, in Clermont, for instance, between him and his partners, I think they had about 12 guys on the contract. So when you walk into the head office or the president's office and stuff, 12 guys,
You got them by
12
the balls.
different commissions, they owe you a shit ton of money. So when you're going to say, listen, sign this guy for this much, but then I'll make sure that this guy goes there, the power is absolutely huge. And exactly like Johnny said, certain agents go well in certain clubs. It's also because of the number of players. Being the agent of Johnny Wilkinson is the easiest job in the world. You put it on LinkedIn. Who wants him? And it starts going mental. I could do that job. We want what, like you saying, faster. And he's like, well, we'll offer this much for Johnny Wilkinson. Just give me more. And that's it. that's all you need to do. That's easy. But for the rest, for the guys that are in the middle, for the guys who are in trouble, for the guys who are competing for spots, it's a tricky position.
Graft.
Always told me it's about the number of guys.
And that's it. It's also the sliding scale of the neediness of each client that they look after. So I would consider myself to be fairly low maintenance. I genuinely spoke to my agent around contract time to see what was out there, but that was it. Whereas you get some guys that are on the phone every day. Oh, I want a commercial this. I want to be doing adverts for Coca-Cola. Never going to happen. You're playing in Pro D2, mate. Like, get over it. It doesn't happen. But that's the thing. Like, I only changed once. So I was with Esportif. And then when I came over to France, I had to take a French-speaking agent that was registered in France. That was the only time I changed agent. But mate, they do an amazing job. And they really, really do. Because, again, the Pacific Islands point is one that Joe touched on, is that those guys particularly would just take what they were given and they wouldn't ask for more. And the agents need to drive and need to fight. And for everybody, but specifically the PIs guys that are in the league, like, need looked after more than anybody else because they're so generous and so kind. And that's it. So look, Jamie obviously doing a fantastic job as well. I think if I could do my time again, I'd have him as an agent. If you're looking for an agent, he'd be awesome. Top bloke. So no, great to have him on.
Definitely. And is it the kind of thing that players talk about when you're in dress rooms as well? Because obviously you mentioned there are good and bad ones. So do you, like, just people come in and you say, my agent said this, and then all of a sudden you find some teammates of yours maybe go with your agent and they change hands like that?
Yeah, but there's loads of different levels to it. So if you find out that there's a guy who's really mouthy and he's burnt loads of bridges, you're like, well, I don't want to go with him because if he's blocked access already to these 5 teams in England or France, I don't want to know. Then you also, there's obviously the layer of, like, there's teams that have loads of commercial activity. So these agents have loads of commercial things, which might give you a little bonus at the end of your contract or something different. So there's loads of different things to discuss. But yeah, like everything, how are you getting on with yours? Oh, he's a jackass, right? Well, you're not going anywhere near. It's the same in every club. Everybody discusses the same things. And if your reputation is crap, you don't get very far.
And bringing it back to the top 14 and present day, one player leaving a club who we were bigging up last week, weren't we, Benji? Bryce Heem. He's for family reasons, but he's leaving Toulon after this week's game against Brive, isn't he?
Yeah, I didn't want to hassle my mate Julian Dupuis too much, but I think from what I hear, it's a pretty he's in a complicated situation. He needs to take care of his family. I think it's not he's not doing it with a happy heart. It's a bit heavy. So you got to do what you got to do. And I think Toulon, to be honest, I wasn't obviously involved in the conversations and stuff, but I think they were pretty understanding, and they helped him. So it's pretty good to see that they need him. They desperately need him because he's on fire.
Good,
he's very good, and he can play multiple positions. He's one of those utility backs that you can use anywhere, and you definitely need him. They've got a few injury guys, especially in the backs, that still haven't come back, so they're waiting for them desperately. And so it's still, I think it's very genuine and kind when the club accepts you. Like, listen, family, human beings, health reasons, whatever, that's much bigger than rugby, and they accepted it. And I thought that's credit to them.
Also very impressive for him, in spite of the issues or problems that he's been having, how well he's been playing. Like, he's been part of that back three with Ais Toyava, who's come back at 15, Gabin Villiers on the other wing. He was amazing again. I did their game for Canal Plus against Stade Francais the weekend. Like, all three of them outstanding. So no, he's hoping whatever it is, it gets itself ironed out, sorts itself out, and he can get back happy and playing wherever he needs to be.
And in the top 14, we're just over the sort of halfway point in the season now. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the second half of the season? It's a very tough campaign to judge with everything going on off the field. But where we're at in terms of the top half of the table, is it kind of panning out as we expected?
Well, with the massive disappointment of Montpellier, who just can't, they just can't get out of their dark zone, and I think it's done now. They won't. It's way too late. So Agen obviously are unfortunately sinking even lower than we thought they could have. Really big problems. So they lost against Toulouse, and even some former Agen guys who signed in Toulouse since Mikel, Balès, Sofiane Guitou, and all those guys. Even then, and it was pretty harsh what they said in the media. They were like, listen, I was actually ashamed of the behavior of some of the Agen players who had a smile on their face after 2 tries that we put on. So Toulouse guys felt more touched and hurt about the behavior of Agen guys, by losing in Agen. So I think it's pretty deep to say that there is a division in the Agen team. Some guys just couldn't care less, unfortunately. Some guys are still hurt and they're trying to fight, but it's not working. So Agen are gone, and that's a pretty sad story. And Montpellier just cannot seem to get out of it. You wanted to speak about rumors, so apparently Michael Cheka one is strong, very strong. I think he could be the man of the. He could be the man for the job. He's obviously a very qualified manager who speaks French.
Yeah,
so that's a huge upside. And if you give him the quality, if the president actually gives him a bit of time and possibility to do well, it could be a game changer. But to do that, they have to be in top 14 next year.
but I would say that the biggest, if you remove, so the big bonus with that, if you're the team that loses the Pro D2 final, it's really hard mentally because you've just lost your final. Years crumbling, but you get a second bite of the cherry for promotion because you get to play at home in front of your fans against the 13th team from top 14. But that's the important bit, is in front of your fans. Now, if you have all that quality, if you have Louis Picamol, Ouedraogo, all these guys coming down to a neutral venue, they have to be stronger than a pro. I don't care. They're stronger than every top 14 side normally. They're not performing, but they've got to be better than like a Perpignan or they have to be. Like I can't see, even if they finish 13th, which is looking like it's going to be between them or Bayonne or possibly Pau, I would say there's more chance of Montpellier pulling their finger out for one game with the quality that they have and winning that one-off game than a team like Bayonne or Pau who have less quality in their squad. So, mate, really, really struggling. Montpellier are properly in the shit. Cheka, absolutely. Like the Stade Francais team that he had 8-9 years ago were fantastic. He did a great job with Stade Francais and really hard to play against, really hard to break down. Obviously, a French speaker, I think he'd be a great addition. Probably the first serious coach they've had since Vern Cotter. But again, the latest in the line in the sort of merry-go-round of the Montpellier story. So they need to sort it out. They need some stability. If they take Cheka, they need to give him 4 or 5 years and just say, look, you're a good coach, international coach. Take your time, bed in and do it properly. But yeah, the bottom of the table is an absolute mess. The top of the table, I think, as would be expected, to lose La Rochelle, Toulon, Racing, Clermont, Bordeaux, 6 of the strongest sides at this halfway point. So they're all sitting pretty at the top.
And just briefly on Agen, who you mentioned, Benji, we know about their problems. It's not looking likely. Are they going to win a game between now and the end of the season, or are they going to go down as the worst team ever in top 14 history?
Unfortunately, imagine all the teams that are going to go play in Agen that could potentially be a little bit weaker. Bayonne already beat them there. Montpellier, I don't think they've played there already, but when they're going to go, it's going to be the game of the century because that's the only game that they'll be able to play. So every single team, nobody's going to go there relaxed. You know, it's going to be, it's a live or die sort of situation. Everybody needs to get points there because nobody lost there. So to be totally honest, from what I see at the moment, I don't see them winning the game, unfortunately.
No. Not at all. Especially not, like you made the point, their attitude. Like even if they don't have the quality, it's more guys are walking around the pitch. That was what the Toulouse players said. They said, look, some guys were smiling after they conceded 2 tries, but it was the work, the people were just walking, not interested, couldn't be bothered. They've lost Ibitoy already. He's gone to Montpellier. Their best player signed there, started playing, got injured again last weekend. But mate, they are in a spot bother.
Absolutely. We will see whether they go down as the worst team, statistically anyway, in top 14 history. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Benji. Big thanks to Jamie Noon, Superagent, for coming on. We'll watch the Johnny Sexton to Clermont move with interest. And thanks to all of you for listening as well. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave us a nice review. We love them. And we will be back with another episode next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers fellas.